to continue to get started, and meeting is being recorded, so whatever feels best and comfortable for you. My name is Mariela Saba. I've been with the coalition since 2011, and here we are. Tonight is our gender and sexuality fight, our working group, our one of our many spaces where we huddle in the coalition and think about community defense and resistance. And tonight we're speaking about criminalization of sex workers. And we also have with us the U.S. Prostitutes Network, or U.S. PROS. Thank you for being here, and thank you, our fellow gender and sexuality team, me, Kim, Chella, Hamid, and folks here from the coalition who, we got together to talk tonight in preparation for more attacks and build our power and our defense and our healing, and be here together against what may be further heightened criminalization during the Superbowl in LA. So let's get to know each other a little bit more. We want you to get to know the coalition through our statement of principles and putting them in practice and sharing one principle during each of our webinars. And so we want to start there, and with that we could use that to inspire our check-in and share a little bit about you. So maybe if we share the principle with you tonight, what we're trying to highlight in our work, and most importantly, practice. And thank you, Nee, holding down tech for us and making this more visually accessible too. So for tonight, wanted to feature this principle as we engage in our topics and fight tonight. And this principle is our commitment to support and fund community defense and building a culture of resistance. We will engage in collective learning with our communities about the state apparatus for surveillance, criminalization, and counterinsurgency. We will resist and support non-compliance with laws, policies, procedures, and actions that violate our community's right to live dignified lives, such as any registries based on race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, or religion, invasions of privacy and/or searches or seizures, and any and all deportations, detentions, and incarceration. This is what we hope to practice tonight. Share some learning, collective learning, and information about what we're learning around the state attacking, especially sex workers. And we want to support our principle around supporting non-compliance with laws, which is the lived reality or experience of people on the ground doing sex work. So this is why I wanted to bring this, and I invite you to check in, to share a little bit about you, maybe your name. If you want to share pronouns, welcome to. And in this February 1st lunar year and new moon, there's a whole lot happening tonight. And it's the year of the tiger. So I've been thinking about that tiger energy this year and what it means in tonight's conversation. Tiger makes me think about wild and courage. So I'm just wondering about you, if you want to share anything about in this new year, what the tiger means for you, how that might relate to our fight tonight, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. Want to hear you and know who's in the room so that we can know each other more before we talk more. I'm going to pass it to some of our folks holding the space tonight. Would you like to go next, Kim, so we can get to know you a little bit more?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Kim. I use she, they pronouns, and the question was, what is the year the tiger bring for us?
Yes.
Okay. I hope to be, I guess, ferocious and really, ferocious with my needs because I have not. So I'll pass it to Chela.
Hey everybody, I'm Fella. I go by she and they. I'm also part of the coordinating team, as well as part of the on the board of SWAP, which is Sex Workers Outreach Project LA. Well, let's see. I think nurturing. I think in the same way, right? Like, I think of a cub, you know, or a tiger, whatever they're called, the babies of tigers. And I think of like the mom that's going to be protectful, and I want to protect my community and the most marginalized, and especially myself, right? Because we can't do anything for others if we can't do anything for ourselves. So yeah, I think around that, and I will pass it to me.
Yali, y'all. My name's Nee. I use she, they pronouns. And I think for this year, definitely sitting with vocalizing and like putting in practice boundaries. So like making sure that like, I think that I'm really good at like kind of like when I see other folks like not doing their boundaries or not like needing that support, I feel like I'm such better at vocalizing that. So definitely want to practice that a lot more about like vocalizing my own needs and setting those boundaries. And then constantly checking in on those as well. And I'll pass it on to Matios.
I just typed it in the chat, but hey friends, my name is Matios, he, him pronouns with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. Year of the Tiger, I think about stripes. I think about how tigers kind of walk majestically and let you take in their stripes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to embody this year, to kind of own my own stripes and walk in that same majesticness. So that's how I'm feeling. And I'm gonna pass it to, I don't think Hamid's gone.
Hey everybody, greetings. Hamid, he, him with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition as well. And I think what this new year also signifies is that we keep that presence, keep that nimbleness, and be able to pivot at any moment with this war, with the system that we are in. And in that war that the system is waging on us, how do we fight back? But also to be very cognitive that the assault is coming from many different directions, the complicity of nonprofits, the complicity of the academy, and the various other complicities that we're also fighting back as well. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation. And I don't see it. I think everybody's gone. If Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself? Unless the person I see on the screen. So unless if you're introducing in chat.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. I use she, her pronouns. And I recently moved to LA. I'm a first year PhD in social welfare at UCLA. So that's where I'm coming from here. And the tiger, I think the first thing I thought about was pace and time and trying to kind of like respond to these systems and their violences like in a pace that is urgent, but with a like a long-term endurance, and trying to understand what that means and that balance is, and trying to think more about my role in that. And in community, and really here to like build relationships and build more. I will pass it to Alexis.
Sorry, it's Alex. Hi everyone. Sorry, it says us like right next to it. It's Alex. I'm with the U.S. Prostitutes Collective. I've been organizing with them since 2016. And yeah, I'm calling in from Chochenyo Ohlone land, otherwise known as Oakland, California. And I was invited tonight along with Rachel to be here as we're collaborating on some work around the Superbowl and criminalization. And we'll talk more about that tonight. But yeah, I am really appreciative of being in the space tonight. So thank you all for inviting us. It's really good to see more folks' faces that I've only been in email with. And also just to continue building as we're based up in the Bay Area. It's really good to connect with other folks that are in other parts of this land and who are also doing similar work. So yeah, the year of the tiger, happy Lunar New Year, everybody, the real New Year. And yeah, the tiger to me is just representing the fierceness of the people and our resistance. So I'm really excited for the work that has been planted over the past couple of years since the pandemic started, and seeing a lot of our fruits and seeds sprouting. I'm gonna pass it to Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's lovely to be here with you all. And in the year of the tiger, I was born in the year of the tiger, so I identify with that. And really looking for connections this new year, you know, for us all to build the movement in a bigger way and to come out of our silos that we're, you know, our various issues we're in, and to cross the divides among us, and really move forward this year. You know, last year was a big step forward for the movement for decriminalization. You know, there were some advances made, and it was, you know, I just really feel the change having organized on this issue since 1982. We've really seen some things open up, and the year of the tiger, I hope more will open up and we can, you know, really challenge the laws and the criminality and the police and the, you know, all of it, really make some breakthroughs on the criminalization. Thanks.
Sweet. Anybody else wanna to share, chime in, or on the chat? Thanks, folks, for sharing. Would you like to go, Priya, Morley? Hopefully I'm saying it.
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Priya. I'm a researcher at the Human Rights Center at UCLA Law School on racial justice and human rights work. And some of my colleagues, I'm new to LA as well. Some of my colleagues informed me about these networks to learn a bit more about how criminalization is operating in this city and in relation to unhoused populations and these kind of big events. And so I'm just really happy to be here and learn more about this and how, you know, these patterns that are happening here are evoking my understanding from other cities and other places as well. I think a lot of similar systems and structures. And I don't know, should I popcorn to someone?
Sure. Feel free to pass if you don't feel like sharing, if you get popcorn.
Sure. Chris?
Hey, what's up? My name is Chris. I organize with Latu, the Vibe chapter of the LA Tenants Union. I like they and he pronouns. And something I've been reading about today is that the Year of the Tiger is one that concentrates on renewal and the exercising of evils. And I'm thinking about the fact that today is also Imbolc, which is a Gaelic and pagan holiday, which is welcoming the sun back into the spring and then summer. So I'm thinking a lot about renewal and what kinds of forces I feel like need to be actually banished from this city. And those are the forces of oppression and policing and incarceration and etc. So that's on my mind. I'm excited to be here to dialogue with all of you. Oh, and I'm not looking at the gallery view, but I'll send to Tiff, did you go?
Yeah, thanks so much. Hi, folks. Tiff, they, them pronouns. I'm with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition as well, and also a member of the coordinating team. And I'm just really glad to be here with folks. And thanks. Really glad to be hearing from folks joining, and excited for us to be building together. And yeah, thinking about the Year of the Tiger, just thinking about being very centered and just feeling very, very focused and kind of centered on our fight and the power that we have. And so just feeling that very much. And yeah, I'm again just really glad to be here tonight. And I believe Shakir is here. I will pass to Shakir if they would like to go.
Yeah, thanks, Tiff. Shakir, I use he, they pronouns with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition as well. Yeah, think about Tiger. Well, first is as I'm Bengali, and so oftentimes like the one of the only things that people know about Bengalis in this country is about tigers. So I feel like I should somehow, honor that. But I don't know, as we're all talking about it, oh, and I see a little tiger on Nee's screen over there. I'm thinking of, tigers are like most creatures operating collectively, usually in packs and moving together and protecting each other and performing different roles and yeah, just watching each other. So that, yeah, just kind of working in that way. I also have behind me actually a picture of a tiger in a cage, which is the opposite of all that, but it's my Zoom background, which maybe is appropriate because I'm in this little box. I don't know, sorry if that's inappropriate, but I don't know who's left. Oh, I see Isaiah, or if you want to chime in, or at this point, honestly, if anyone just wants to jump in and hasn't been able to share yet, maybe go ahead.
Sorry, I'm eating dinner, but my name's Isaiah. I go by he, him, health pronouns. Well, yeah, I don't really know that much about like the Chinese zodiac, Year of the Tiger, but yeah, I guess, just gotta work together, that's all I gotta say.
Sweet, thank you. Enjoy your meal. And just wonder if Ada or Farzana or Jody, anyone else want to share? No pressure, just a way to get to know each other. It's important to build trust when we have these conversations too. Or Andrew, or anyone else.
I'm happy to share. Hi, I'm Jody. I'm also fairly new to LA. I learned about Stop LAPD Spying because I organized at USC as part of USC abolition to help working towards abolishing the campus police. So I'm really looking forward to being here and learning from everyone. And also thinking of Shakir sharing that you have that photo of a tiger in a cage. I actually saw this poem on Twitter earlier today that was written by a 6-year-old, and it says, "The tiger, he destroyed his cage. Yes, yes, the tiger is out." So I just wanted to share that.
I'll jump in quickly and just say, my name's Untitled. I use he, him pronouns. I teach at UCLA Law School. I'm excited to be here and I guess to embrace the tiger's agility and the need to be mobile and on your feet as threats change.
Thank you for that and welcome. All right, y'all, just no pressure. Just one more round to check in if anyone else is feeling that tiger courage to share in any way. Your presence is more than enough already too. Okay, sweet. Well, just want to say thank you all for sharing and bringing all of that energy into tonight's conversation. I don't think I shared anything about the tiger and me, but let's see that this year I'm going to be birthing another little being out here. So I'm feeling that strength, that power, that energy. And I really feel it's always critical to organize and defend in our time. And it feels just even more critical. And I feel opportunity. I feel power brewing. So grateful for this conversation tonight and the land we're on, Tongva land, and the generations that we're building on when we think and talk about our folks in sex work. We're talking about a lot of ancestors and ancient and present times too. So may the fight continue and may we win. And I want to pass it to Kim, and I'll co-hold the space with you. Kim has been part of these meetings and has been stepping in more into the coalition. So just want to acknowledge you and thank you for helping lead tonight's conversation.
Thank you, Mariela, for that. Yeah, so tonight we decided that we would do kind of a brief overview of what sex work is and how it intersects with our fight against the policing and surveillance of marginalized folks of all genders and of all sexualities. Yes, okay, so I like to start disclosing who I am because as a longtime student, I always hear people talk about things as an expert, and I'm always like, wait, how are you an expert, right? Did you experience this or what's going on? I'm Kim. I grew up in Echo Park. I grew up in a working poor family of Mexican immigrants, and I am an erotic content creator as well as a graduate student. I love teaching about gender and sexuality because a lot of people don't see how it intersects with our everyday life. And most of my students are fresh out of high school, so I apologize if this is very elementary for some folks, but I think it's always a good way to start and assume that people don't know much about a topic so that everyone can kind of learn together. So some starting truths that I want to start with is that everyone sells their body under capitalism, right? And I say body because that's the narrative that's told about sex workers, right? Oh, you sell your body, when in fact, sex workers sell a service. So with the logic of selling your body, well, technically everybody sells their body to capitalism, right? I sell my body to the university, and as well as most of us. And something else that I wanted to start with is that sex isn't inherently immoral, right? So morality, values, and ethics are all varying, right, by cultures, traditions, communities. Most of what we see as like hegemonic thought or really fucked up politics that claim us to be immoral or unethical, right, are really just imposed by colonialism, slavery, and all these other historical processes. Sex, like gender and sexuality, right, was deemed immoral because of the nature of colonialism and religion. So that's where most of our understandings come from, and that's where most of the laws unfortunately come from, right? From these so-called universal white colonialist ideals. So here I have sex isn't inherently moral. Most of our understandings of gender and sexuality are imposed by colonialism and capitalism and work to discipline our communities and bodies for the benefit of maximum productivity to the state and economy, right? So who benefits from stigmatizing sex work? And those are just some questions that I want you all to think about as we move forward. So sex work is any type of labor where the explicit goal is to produce a sexual erotic response in a client. And this is the definition directly gotten from SWAP USA. Sex work is also called a sex trade, and it's disproportionately made up of marginalized people, such as people of color, disabled people, migrants, queer and trans people, especially trans women. The term sex work was first coined by Carol Lee, aka Scarlet Harlot, and it had an emphasis on labor, right? The fact that sex work is work, an emphasis in reducing stigma and also building solidarity. So once we have a name to it, right? Sex work, we're saying these folks are sex workers and therefore they deserve rights in the workplace just like anybody else. And the key thing right here is solidarity while acknowledging differences, right? Because white sex workers have a very different experience as sex workers of color, right? Working poor sex workers have a very different experience as middle class, upper class sex workers, and so on. So on the next slide, there's breaking down the sex work hierarchy and how it basically determines how vulnerable you are to police, clients, and what kind of pay you receive. So sex work hierarchy would be, so the type of sex work would be camming, that's a stripping, we're supposed to be stripping or dancing, pornography, phone sex, dominatrixes, sugar babying, escorting, or full service work. Along with these very different types of sex work, right, we have access to space. So when sex workers are street-based, for example, they have a lot more vulnerability to be stopped by police, to be harassed or face violence from clients, and to be surveilled by regular community members, right? So some things to think about for right now, just out of kind of like the knowledge that we all have, are what are some ideologies that circulate regarding sex work within our communities? What are the institutions that uphold these ideologies? And how do we perpetuate whorephobia or sex work stigma, right, within our communities and families? So it's open to anyone. If anyone has any ideas or answers.
Also welcome to put them in the chat if that feels more accessible or comfortable for you.
I have a stigma that people who engage in sex work, that's the only job they can do. There you go.
I think another stigma for me is that that you inherently always want to have sex, which is, I don't understand where this understanding, I mean, I do, but it's a hard separation from the personal and professional, I guess, when you do sex work, right? And people perceive you as always sexually available. That's why things like consent are important, right?
That just because a person has engaged in sex with a sex worker, they have access to their body whenever. I have seen that multiple times.
I'll say one. This is like a stigma that I have personally experienced and that I see a lot, but like when you tell somebody that you're a sex worker, they like assume that you're some kind of like victim, and that you need to be rescued from like what you're doing. And I mean, just like the general, it's not acceptable, but there's this specific like, oh my God, I need to save you. And I guess that's where like the term Captain Save a Hoe comes from, you know?
I think kind of related to that is that also like when like that same in that same vein of like, oh, like you need to be saved, also that like people doing sex work couldn't be doing it of their own, like, you know, choice, autonomy, agency, volition. Obviously it's a reality also that there are a lot of people who are doing it, you know, in a situation where they're being exploited or trafficked. But it's almost like there's this, and often that idea is very gendered of like that, oh, like, for example, a woman or femme identifying like sex worker couldn't be like it's another way of kind of maybe taking away people's agency and ability to like, or their like capacity to make choices themselves by saying, oh, it's only because the only reason you would want to assert that identity or act in that way is, or do that as your work, is because someone else is making you do it.
Yeah, you also made me think too of like how they put all this, or there's this stigma that, oh my God, you know, this is such a bad thing that you're doing. And there's this misconception that everyone's being exploited, but they, you know, like you were mentioning before, we're all selling our bodies to capitalism. And so they use that to like distract from the exploitation that other workers experience. And like, you know, we have community members that work at McDonald's who get treated worse than some of us who do sex work. And like, yeah, we all get treated like shit at the end of the day. But it takes away from this idea that workers are exploited under capitalism. So this stigma that sex work is just so much worse than everything else. And then trafficking too, like this, that, you know, we're all forced to do it. And if they want to make an argument about trafficking, we're being trafficked by capitalism in general. And yeah, so, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down.
I have another one, and I think, and this is especially big within just real being Black communities and Christian mongering around. If you're a queer and or trans sex worker, you're gonna get AIDS. You're gonna get AIDS and die. You're gonna be an addict. You're gonna be an addict, get AIDS, and die, unless you accept Jesus. Fuck colonization.
Yes, thank you.
I have, you know, something that we come up against a lot, which is the feminist, a sector of the feminist movement who are very anti-sex work. I mean, they're a real problem, and you know, really kind of our opposition, because they say that sex work causes rape, you know, blame rape on sex work, and you know, degrades women, and it's, you know, terrible. I mean, it's really coming from, you know, that higher sector of feminism, and it's, yeah, it's really a problem. And yeah, that's who's kind of leading the anti-trafficking. Well, the government is pushing it, but they really have taken up the anti-trafficking agenda in a big way. The anti-trafficking feminist.
Yes, the SWORFs, as Alex put in the chat, sex worker exclusionary radical feminists. There's also TERFs, right? So one of my friends says, where there's a TERF, there's a SWORF, and when there's a TERF, when there's a SWORF, there's a TERF. Meaning, right, as Rachel was saying, within feminism, there's a rather large sector that are called carceral feminists, right? That look to the prison, industrial complex, the police state to solve these issues, right? So if we go to the next slide. And thank you all so much for bringing up all these wonderful stuff because I'm like, oh my God, I should have asked these after. But anyway, sex work and trafficking narratives, right? That's all we hear when it comes to sex work in the popular media. So conservatives and carceral efforts to conflate sex work and trafficking use language to protect women, right? Protect girls all over the world. When in reality, carceral feminists turn to solutions that expand prison and policing system rather than addressing the root causes of issues. There's actually a really large sector of nonprofit organizations that dedicate their time to do international stings. I'm sure they do this locally as well, right? Where they basically have a man who's a member of their organization go into brothels around the world, usually countries like Thailand, Chile, the Philippines, right? To expose, right, sex trafficking and all these things. Yes, and it's very rooted in this like missionary work, right, to save these poor girls of color. So there's a lot of things going on, right? There's the white savior complex, of course, but also this idea that the US and US feminists are somehow the most radical, right? US exceptionalism, that the US is doing everything right. And if you're a sex worker, you're obviously doing this out of force, which is not only conservatives, right, but also Democrats. So this is a bipartisan effort. This is a carceral feminist effort. And I recently, I forgot what market I went to. And there was advertisements everywhere to donate to trafficking, to end trafficking, which was really wild for me to see that. Like, and I'm sure it's related to the upcoming Superbowl as well. So basically, right, it empowers people to be snitches, to work on behalf of the state. And locally, we have folks who actually write down license plates numbers and turn them into the police. So these efforts are all coming out of the stigmatization that sex workers are forced to do this, right? And there's no way that this can be consensual. So again, internationally, this looks like Christian missionaries conducting stings across countries such as Thailand, India, Philippines, where many times sex workers are migrants in these countries, and stings ultimately lead to their deportation. And the deportation of sex workers is just kind of seen as collateral damage, right? When in fact, these missionaries actually made sex workers' lives much worse. So what does this look like locally? These anti-trafficking narratives, anti-trafficking efforts. And I wanted to ask this question because we have so many amazing people in the room right now, and I feel like, I don't know, this is such a rich webinar to think about how the policing efforts look like locally for sex workers, and how do they, where are these efforts coming from, but also what would be, I guess, a quote unquote solution rather than criminalizing sex workers. And these are just questions to think about. But I do want us to think about, what does this look like locally?
It always has, well, anytime I've been to any like LAPD headquarters or space like that, it's one of their bumper stickers. It's one of their campaigns. Yeah, that's what they wear on the back of their vehicles many times. It's almost a slogan.
So the last meeting, not for gender sexuality, but Stop LAPD Spying, someone mentioned the Dream Center. The Dream Center, one of their things is they talk a lot. There's like this woman who's always talking about getting people out of human trafficking, and they've been doing that in LA like for the last 20 years with sex workers who actually choose to do sex work. They've been going up to them and giving them roses and being like, oh, Jesus loves you, but not like this, you know? So like, it's a whole religious thing. So that's what it makes me think of. Fuck the Dream Center.
It was in and out.
Huh, what did you say?
I was agreeing with Alex in the comments. I mentioned a human trafficking campaign and like donating to it, and it was in and out where I saw this, right? Which is known to have conservative owners or CEOs or whatever.
Do they have a lot of Christian like propaganda in their marketing? Like, yeah, I'm sure if y'all
Yeah,
eat
they
those
have a
things,
Bible
they'll-
verse under their cup. They have
yeah,
like, they're Christian owned. In and Out is Christian owned.
yeah, everything like the cups to the French fries they use. Yeah.
You know, the sex trafficking I've noticed over the years. Yeah, I remember the days when they invented it, you know, because we were at that point, we were really getting close to decriminalization. And suddenly this whole trafficking agenda appears. It's very useful, but it's so normalized now, you know, that students that come in to work with us, everybody has the trafficking agenda. You know what I mean? It's just right in society because there's been so much money put into it. You know, it's an enormously well-funded campaign. There's so many nonprofits that are doing anti-trafficking work. So it's just like it's work that we have to do. You know, we have students come in that work with us, and you know, they're immediately talk about trafficking, and then you know, when you give a different point of view, people go, oh wow, you know, I never thought of that. Same when we went to speak to a whole group of religious women, every single one from all different denominations, all had the trafficking agenda. That's all they hear about. And people really are amazed to hear that there's, you know, another point of view, that it's not what it's, you know, presented to be. So it's really very insidious. But, you know, there's starting to be cracks in that wall that we've been up against, you know, which is the way to block decriminalization.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for that. Oh, Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that point. I don't know as much about what kinds of like policies and ordinances are in effect currently or maybe in development, but I'm just thinking historically about the ways in which both the police and the legislature, like, you know, the state at large, tends to criminalize sex work in a way where it's couched inside of legislation that is like technically not just about sex work or even not explicitly about sex work. And I'm thinking about like in LA in the 50s and 60s and how any kind of like gay sex or queer conduct happening was kind of lumped in with the criminalization of sex work. So you have all these like no cruising laws, no standing laws, like things that prohibit groups of people from standing or just sort of existing in space, which is also something that these laws and ordinances tend to do. Is like, how do we criminalize people literally just being in public? And you have that with the like, you can be, I think they finally struck it down, but there was that law that was on the books for years and years that if you had any kind of prophylactic on your person, like you could be arrested as a sex worker because you were carrying a condom. So just thinking about the ways it gets really insidious and kind of like veiled in terms of who is actually being targeted versus like what the public facing talking point.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually still happens. We just read a report where, sorry, I'm pulling up the report right now, but basically there's kind of a graph that says how probable cause was established. And one of them was possession of condoms, as well as clothing and standing in a corner or in a space that is deemed like the Figueroa corridor, for example. So that's still going on, but it's kind of couched in this probable cause, right, which is at the discretion of cops.
Well, actually, that's actually, we got rid of that law, which was amazing, because the police cannot use condoms as evidence in California now. You know, so it was first we got the policy passed in San Francisco. The police and the DA, you know, couldn't use condoms as evidence. And then it went statewide. And so we got a bill, and it was like a real breakthrough, that bill, that banned the police from using, you know, taking condoms and being used in court as evidence. Because up till that time, we could get nothing through the California legislature. It was completely blocked, and all they talked about and passed bills, there were 80 anti-trafficking bills one year, and that's all that happened. And this was when we got the condoms as evidence bill thrown out, and that you could, you know, the police couldn't arrest you if you were reporting violence. That was the first time that the word sex worker was even brought up in the California legislature. They would never use that. It was always anti-trafficking victims. You know, so that bill that passed, when was it, 2019, I think, was a real breakthrough. You know, the first time the California legislature had really passed something like that. So we were really glad, you know, that we won that. Took years of organizing, but it was a real victory.
Yeah, I dropped our Know Your Rights booklet in the chat that has some more info about some of the laws that just got passed within the past 5 years.
Thank you so much, Alex and Rachel, for that. On the next slide, we have basically the model that the US uses for sex work, except for the 11 rural counties in Nevada. So we have full criminalization in the US, which is in the red, as well as all the other red countries. We have full criminalization of seller, buyer, and third parties. Vulnerability, which produces vulnerability to the state, and of course, police violence and incarceration. Criminalization creates a trap where fines and records, of course, require the continuation of sex work, right? In an understanding that any criminalization is a trap and not gonna serve to address any root cause, right? Again, the US model is criminalization, except for 11 rural counties in Nevada, where registration and weekly health checks are required. And these counties also ban sex workers from gaining residency. So they have long commutes to the brothels where they work at. And basically kind of like street vending, right? Where we see the legalization of street vending, but yet there's still folks being criminalized and getting their stuff thrown away. On paper, right, it requires registration and health checks, which are inaccessible for most folks. And it's unrealistic, if that makes sense. It's not the answer that workers want. So if we move on to the next couple of slides, this is FOSTA, which was recently passed. Was created in the House of Representatives, right? And it's again a way to criminalize sex workers through the guise of fighting sex trafficking. It targeted Bedpage, which was a website used for, or sorry, it was Backpage. Now there's Bedpage, I think. A website used to advertise services, Craigslist personal ads, among other websites, and it pushed sex workers who were using these sites to advertise to traffickers, ironically, right? Not ironically, actually, because of the lack of advertising or time for screening clients. So when there was a loss for these websites, right, folks either turned to, again, being street-based or requiring someone to kind of manage clients and screen clients. And I don't know if anyone has heard of the OnlyFans drama that went on, I think October. Basically, credit card companies, again, pushed by bipartisan efforts and also religious groups, as well as carceral feminists, pushing for censorship of sex work and workers on digital platforms because they use the argument that they want to protect themselves from underage sex work. And websites such as OnlyFans basically built their platform and gained popularity because of sex workers, and are always constantly threatening sex workers that they're going to kick them out of their platform, right? They already take 20% of your pay, and there is other websites that have been created by sex workers themselves. However, it's either like a larger cut that they take, or there's other issues with the platform. So OnlyFans is kind of right now one of the most popular platforms, and yet it's always threatening sex workers who built it up. Did anyone hear about this like push for the censorship of digital sphere?
Yeah, we had worked with when SESTA and FOSTA was moving, worked with a couple groups, kind of just looking at what their legislative fight could be based on the algorithmic ecology work, like what is the broader ecology and where does power lie? It's almost like a power mapping exercise. So this was with Hacking and Hustling and a couple of the groups too. But just real quickly, one thing was really just really messed up about that was this whole restriction of credit card that basically affected people's everyday living, and you know, so yeah, so that was really messed up. Kim, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. On the next slide, there's also other models that are used around the world. Partial criminalization, which still bans brothels, pushes workers to be street-based. And something really interesting about, not interesting, but specific, right, about this is that you can't, location and space is very, I guess it makes you vulnerable to what type of violence you're exposed to, right? So if you're street-based, you're going to be exposed to a lot more violence versus if you are, you do like out calls and all these, well, no, just kidding. It's all kind of scary and at the discretion of clients. But so if you're a sex worker in the partial criminalization countries, and you take clients into your home, right, where maybe your roommate is also a sex worker, you would be considered a brothel. So it's small things like that that make partial criminalization also very unrealistic and unsuccessful for sex workers. The Nordic model / the Swedish model seeks to end demand, right, but doesn't really do anything again about root causes, and it's still criminalizing clients. Legalization, which is in the green, state-controlled registration, health checks again, and we already kind of talked about this, but usually the most marginalized folks can't do legal sex work anyway because of immigration status and other obstacles that come with dealing with the state. And finally, decriminalization, right, which is what workers want. On the next slide, we have vulnerabilities to violence. So thinking about how stigma, social marginalization, and lack of voice due to victimization discourse, right, really affects the way that intra-community, we don't have conversations about sex workers. We don't have, and by intra-community, I mean, I guess my experience more so organizing with either race-based groups or like abolition groups, right? Aside from Stop LAPD Spying, there's really conversations around sex workers because there's still heavy stigmatization and marginalization within our own community members, right? Our families, for example. So the illicit nature of some sex work puts sex workers at risk from asking for help, right? And as Rachel was saying, this had to be put into legislation for it to be respected. The fact that if a sex worker calls for help, right, they won't be arrested themselves, which again, up to discretion, like all laws. Lack of labor rights and protections, lack of benefits or unions. There's interesting things going on in terms of sex workers being independent contractors, and that's specific to stripping and dancing, right, versus sex workers being employees. Lack of legal recourse for abuse by employers, management, customers, or police. Ideologies about race, gender, sexuality, body type, ability, class, nation, and age shape the sex market, of course, right? We see these things in pornography, we see these things all over, right? Which is often used as the excuse, right, that sex work or pornography is causing rape, is causing like all these other expectations on sex. However, right, pornography and sex work is a reflection of society, essentially. So where you have these very like racist porn categories, right, a reflection of society. And I just have a picture here of Daniel Holtzclaw, who targeted 13 Black women who had records or history of drug use or sex work. And he used that to his advantage in order for him to assault these women, right? Knowing that he'd have less of a chance of being prosecuted because they were sex workers. I didn't want to end on a bad note, so I just wanted to talk about resistance that's going on with Coyote, Call Off Your Old Tired Ethics, Swap USA, Young Women's Empowerment Project, the Pros Network, Red Umbrella Project, the Desiree Alliance, right? That's on the next slide. And I just had also some books and people that I thought if you all want further reading or something. And yeah, it's really important for people to pay for their porn. And I feel like nobody really talks about that, right? And pay for all their sexual labor. So including that, right, in your social justice ethics. And lastly, I had some questions for us to kind of meditate on, but I also wanted us to talk about if Tiff was able to talk about the commissioner meeting and what LAPD is describing as their human trafficking task force.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Kim, were you pausing for me to do that right now, or were you saying after this part?
However you feel. We kind of have the slides the other way, but it doesn't matter.
No, yeah, please do it however you would prefer.
Okay, you could chime in right now.
Okay. Okay. So essentially, thanks. Yeah, thanks for this great information, folks. And so essentially, just to be checking, Kim, are you looking now for, because we did, you're right, we had there was a presentation, or there recently was a presentation from the police commission or at the police commission about the LAPD's human trafficking task force. You're just looking for like a, okay. Yeah, so essentially, and what we're looking at here on this slide, that's that's the faces of the people who were at the meeting. And that was, I believe this was at the meeting 2 weeks ago. And essentially, so the LAPD has a task force. They call it the Human Trafficking Task Force. It's something we heard about last year because they had a presentation a year ago with many of these same folks there, talking about why it needed to be funded, like what is the policing effort and why it needs to be funded, and to
to get the police commission to come on board with why it should be funded, they brought in the leaders of the advocate groups that some of that you were talking about previously, Kim, how police like work with these nonprofit organizations who they kind of hand off, or that they funnel folks to, or they call when they do these raids and they say, we have, you know, someone here. So they have these local groups in LA. Zoe International is one, Saving Innocence is one, and there's another one. And so some of these folks are from those organizations. And yeah, what we heard this year and last year was some of the work that LAPD is doing and the way that they are essentially targeting sex workers under the guise of rescuing children from human trafficking. You know, they say it's about decreasing human trafficking or going after traffickers, but then it very quickly became a narrative to do with rescuing specifically children from these situations. Yeah, I won't talk too long, but just a couple things that were interesting in listening back to the presentation was we heard, as you noted, like very much a conflation between sex work and human trafficking. And when kind of pressed on that point, as they did last year, it became very clear that these folks on the screen all believe that they are one and the same, that if you are engaging in sex work, that you are being human trafficked. It is coercion. That is their view on it. And so they're very much kind of treating them the same. And the LAPD talked about how they were responding to complaints or calls or reports of prostitution that was going on. And then they came in with the narrative of making it about rescuing people and it being about shutting down human trafficking. And we also heard from some of these so-called advocate groups about how decriminalization would be terrible and would be disastrous and would just lead to an explosion of even more trafficking of young children. So there was there's a whole lot going on. And essentially what was even more interesting was at the end of the presentation a week ago, during that presentation, one of the commissioners said to Moore, what would you need to do more work? And he said, I would need 100 more cops. And at the end of the presentation, they said, we are so moved, we would like to write a letter to City Council that you will get your 100 cops. And that was just based on what they said in this presentation. So I was very struck by that. And yeah, I don't know if folks have any questions specifically, but I'll just pause there.
Sorry, I had to take my camera off because my internet's a bit weird. So they want to give 100 more cops to do anti-trafficking specifically, right? You were saying?
Yeah, and the work that, so they just, LAPD talked a little bit about the work that they do when they're doing this anti-human trafficking work, and it essentially involves, it's very much focused on specific areas or corridors that they have identified as being tied to sex work. And they look at things like they said in the past year, we've made over 300 arrests and we've given 1,700 traffic tickets, like not trafficking, but like literally like vehicle traffic tickets to, I guess, that was how they were policing the area. And they talked about the surveillance they're using. They talked about getting people's cell phones and extracting the information from it. So they have different types of surveillance that they're doing in these locations. And they have also conduct different specific operations and raids. So he was saying, we have all these cops doing this work and we would like 100 more to do even more specialized and targeted work.
Yeah, because we found out in San Francisco that, you know, when the police arrest someone for prostitution, they document it as trafficking. Yes, they weren't even writing down prostitution anymore. So, they're talking about sting operations and prostitution enforcement, right? So this anti-trafficking task force, that's really what they're doing. Nothing about finding victims of trafficking. It's just prostitution enforcement. Yeah. More crackdowns, I imagine. Yeah. 100 more cops.
So in the slide before, I had some questions for us to kind of think about or brainstorm about, right? So how are sex workers experiencing police surveillance and criminalization in California? And Tiff gave us a wonderful breakdown about the meeting and right, how is LAPD strategizing to criminalize and incarcerate sex workers and conduct stings and raids? How does 4118 ordinance affect sex workers who are street-based? So 4118 is an ordinance that was renewed in Los Angeles to ban basically loitering encampments, really criminalize unhoused communities, right? And anyone from occupying public space. How does the Superbowl exacerbate these conditions? What are some resources we can brainstorm together to center sex workers toward our fight for abolition? So now we have our wonderful folks from the Olympics, US pros, for us to really think about, right, what are some of the next steps that we could take? I know for our mapping group, we are brainstorming and talking about mapping out all the surveillance technologies such as anger points and other forms of policing near the Super Bowl and also on Figueroa. Ahmed, did you have something to?
It's gonna pass it on to Nina. Nina and I were gonna do that conversation. So on to Nina.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so we like in conversations, right? Like both in hearing like the police commission and the language that they're pulling and the ways in which they're using like these sound bites of like Kim was saying, like save the girls or protect the girls, to like get more resources to criminalize folks. I think that like one important thing to highlight even from the police commission too, was when one of the sergeants was talking about like how many arrests they make versus how many folks like even under what they're saying, right, it's for trafficking and for protecting folks. When you look at the arrest rates as well, you know that the logic or what the sound bites that they're using to be able to get these resources and to get like to sway the public isn't real when you actually look at who's being targeted. And so the effects that it has as well, and when you think about like as we're approaching Super Bowl season, which is what next week, and as like people have been prepping and having games and coming out of town, and just in like looking at the history of major sporting events, we wanted to look and kind of have those conversations as well with folks that have been doing the work and have been like looking at like the ties between or the parallels between major sporting events as well as like the increased police presence and the targeting of sex work when it comes to major sporting events. And so I know Hamid, you wanted to talk about I'm sorry if I botched this, the NSSE, the National Special Security Events, and how like specifically the surveillance state that happens when there are these sporting events and the amount of resources that are taking place and how that shows up on the ground. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about like that's the policing programs and the surveillance that is being utilized as a way of thinking about and like considering like what our calls to action would be and like what the ongoing on the ground work that is happening, so we can also figure out ways that we can plug in as well.
Thank you, Nina, and thank you, Kim, for that really just a very instructive and a great presentation. I think for today's conversation, it'll be good to ground ourselves as to what does this policing mean when they talk about Super Bowl and when they talk about these major sporting events. While this policing is nothing new, it has been going on for decades. During Clinton's time, and how many times does Clinton come up in our conversation, the great liberal champion, was this current iteration of legislation passed called the NSSE, the National Special Security Event, which basically federalizes and encompasses various sort of different types of events that are happening, whether it's a visit from a head of state, whether it's a political convention, whether it's just the meeting of the electoral college. I mean, there are different things as well. Super Bowl, the baseball series, various other major sporting events, presidential elections, the president's visit, on and on and on. So what they do is that this becomes more of a federalized operation where Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and various other federal agencies, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then the local agencies where things are going on become very integral to the local policing that is going on as well. And one of the clear experiences that we've had going back to was to what happened before, during, and after the 1984 Olympics and other major sporting events, and the major cleanup of that happened. I mean, there was a point in 1984 where there were close to about 1,600 youth were arrested under the guise of gang activity, right around the run-up to 1984 Olympics. And then all the massive sweep of unhoused people that happened near USC and near the campus and the Coliseum as well. So that complete removal of people, a major infusion of weaponry, of tanks, of grenade launchers, of various other things, massive expansion of surveillance. So all of these things kind of expand that infrastructure. So our hope was to, as we plan our call to action and our defense, is but in order to knowing our fight, and that's what these webinars are, know your fight, that what exactly are we dealing with, to do a deeper dive. So that's why we have with us folks who've been organizing around it. We have Gigi from No Olympics, who've been on the front line in LA and organizing against these things as well. And then we have Rachel and Alex from US Pros Collective to have this conversation. So that's what we wanted to do. So maybe, Nina, we can start off with asking Gigi as to what's going on.
Yeah. First of all, literally right before I'm putting a tweet that we did because there's some images in it. Today we found, or one of our members found, I don't know where they got it from, these pins from 1984 that are pretty messed up, of the, I think they called it their vice squad that they distribute around the 1984 Olympics. So they're pretty messed up pins. It's pretty messed up that they were distributing, kind of like those Disneyland collectible pins for criminalizing sex workers. But if you want to check out a little bit of history, I threw the tweet in there. So we've been talking to a lot of local organizations, and what we've been seeing and hearing about is, and not just local organizations, but groups around the country, just a lot of what we've been talking about today, the increase of police presence. We've had people saying that they're going to be leaving the city in the lead up to the Super Bowl because of the increased policing of sex workers. They just don't even want to be in the city around that time period, because a lot of the work that would be offered is a lot of police stings. Just we we see this when there's lead up to any of the big NSSE events. Yeah, I don't really know what to add. There's been a lot of good stuff that's already gone over, but we've seen, we saw this in 84, and we keep seeing it when these big events happen. And if I'm floundering a little bit, it's because so much good information is already, we've already gone over it, that I'm trying not to be repetitive. So if one of the other orgs would like to jump in, and from Pros Collective, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Gigi. I'm sorry, Rachel or Alex?
Yeah, I could start and then Alex add in. Yeah, I mean, as we've all been saying, every year there's a Super Bowl, there's a big hype, a huge hype around, you know, sex trafficking. We've seen it in LA. The sheriff's department issued a press release saying Super Bowl draws human traffickers, and they have, you know, posters at the airport in LA saying be alert for human trafficking. And it's, you know, huge operations where they bring in, like Hamid was saying, you know, hundreds of law enforcement, ICE, all of them, you know, they bring them to supposedly go after sex traffickers, all under the guise of this. But it's been proven, you know, over and over again. People have written articles about it. It's absolutely shown that there's no increase in sex trafficking during Super Bowl and sporting events. You know, there's even anti-trafficking organizations are saying it. But no matter, the same ritual happens every year, like in LA, you know, this whole big push around trafficking, and all the organizations, the anti-trafficking organizations. Anti-trafficking day was January the 11th. That's when the sheriff, you know, released the whole thing about trafficking. And they, of course, they mix up prostitution and trafficking. And, you know, people that have gone and looked at who was actually arrested during Super Bowl, it was, you know, mostly sex workers, almost exclusively, but, you know, people for other kinds of drunk driving, or not having a license, or drugs, or, you know, anything but traffic, anything but arresting traffickers or catching, you know, victims of trafficking. It's just a big hype. And so we decided to really disrupt the hype this year. And so we got together with, you know, some other sex work groups, and started a campaign, Stop the Raids, you know, to try and really get it out there publicly that this, you know, to discredit it, this whole hype, how that's really just an excuse for sting operations and raids and crackdowns against sex work. And so we've been meeting, and, you know, we've contacted Stop LAPD Spying because we really wanted to, you know, connect with people who the impacted Black and brown communities, you know, because we know that that's who's going to be targeted, like it always is, and especially in LA, high numbers of those who are arrested are Black women mainly, and people of color, even so-called clients, you know, when they go after men who are looking to buy sex, or could just be somebody out there in the neighborhood who they decide is a client and get arrested. So that 75% of clients in LA are Latino men, Latinx men, you know, so it's racial profiling going on clearly. And that's who we know who's going to, you know, be the targets during the Super Bowl, and houseless people. It's already started. They're already breaking down camps, you know, as Super Bowl gets closer. So we wanted to really, you know, publicize it and organize against this crackdown, and really try and disrupt this narrative that, you know, this happens. All these young girls and women are being trafficked, you know, during the Super Bowl. And anti-trafficking nonprofits too are all involved in this lie, basically. So we decided we're going to do an event in LA, but with COVID and everything going up, we decided to do a webinar, and it's going to be on the 9th of February. And, we've really pushed, us pros, our organization has really pushed in this coalition to, have the people and the women who are, facing this crackdown to really be visible and have, represented in the webinar. And so that's kind of where we're at, really, reaching out to groups, and Margaret Prescott of the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, has been helping us because they've done a lot of work in LA, against the police, calling for police accountability in the murders of over 200 women, Black women who are dead or missing. Do you want to? Oh, and just one thing just to say, and then I'll let Alex continue, is that in the process of this, we did see a very good report that came out of LA from the Human Rights Clinic at USC Gould, where they pretty much discredited the whole practice, the police practices. It's quite critical for academics to take on the anti-trafficking operations, and it really, is quite. It's really criticizes the whole thing, the whole way law enforcement does anti-trafficking operations, and how brutal it is to actually describe, how women are abused and raped and even, mishandled and threatened by police. So they're quite critical of the police, and really kind of blows the whole thing open, so it's useful to have this report right now, which we're also publicizing, because it doesn't go as far as saying decriminalization, but it really does show how they it's just a big hype, and the police say how successful these raids are, and how they caught all these traffic victims, and that it's just not true, and that it's, they say that something needs to change, that the police operations, should be stopped and find another way to deal with trafficking. So, that was a bit of a breakthrough to have that report, which we will, highlight. Do you want to carry on, Alex? Anything else?
Yeah, I don't know what else to hit on. There's so much that's involved in this. And I think a number of things that we've seen with some of the research that's come out is that even the Superbowl myth around trafficking has been debunked, and that information has been fact-checked, and Rob Bonta is using that information still. And so we have like our elected officials still pushing the messaging that's been fact-checked by the people. Nothing new. We live in this Trump era with that. So I think it's important that we just are very adamant on getting the truth out there, and learning the truth and helping educate other people about why decrim is so important, and how do we build people power to end this criminalization. And I like how you framed it earlier, Kim. You were talking about how with the law, some of the rights that we have as sex workers are only taken seriously when they're put into law, or respected. However, they're not going to respect this stuff. It's not like the code out there. That's not our civil code as human beings, right? As solid people, yes, but not in the common. So I think it's important that we push for, I like how critical resistance frames it like non-reformist reforms, right? How do we fight for things that are aligned with our principles without sacrificing our dignity? So there's so much. It's a little late. We've had a long day today. But we're having this webinar, it's a sex worker rights symposium on the 9th. from 6 to 8. And I dropped some links in the chat where you can go and check out information about the event and register for it. We will be having myself and Chella from Stop LAPD Spying and Swap LA speaking. And yeah, and we're also going to have some people from the Black Coalition. So Nana Gyamfi is going to be speaking too. And so we're, you know, it's going to be a really great opportunity for us to set the record straight about what the truth is happening, and also to continue this work in Los Angeles. And yeah, because we're not, you know, I'm not from Los Angeles respectively. So I think it's just really important for us to all connect this to a bigger thing. Like decrim is not just the issue of sex work, right? Like this is an issue of all people who are at the bottom, all criminalized people. And I'm, yeah, just really excited that we're able to sit in this space together and figure out ways to move forward with this. And I'm thankful that, you know, folks are on this call learning, you know, people who aren't have the 101 down. So it's really important. This is like the first step. Radicalize yourself around how decrim and criminalization and all the funding of the police, like was mentioned earlier, the police and these human trafficking groups are like even pushing, you know, against their own lies, right? They're going into spaces and saying that decrim isn't the right thing. Like the other day, someone sent me a webinar series that was being put on by a group in Santa Cruz, but the webinar series was called like sex work and like trauma. And like the way they framed it, they even put decrim in the description, but they put it in quotation marks. And then when you get on to the actual webinar, it was like some shit connected to the Polaris project. So the trafficking people are getting really slick, and they're recognizing that their messaging is not working anymore because decrim is becoming popular because people understand, are becoming more aware of what it really means. And I think they're also connecting it more to a prison abolition and a decolonial like perspective too. So yeah, I don't want to ramble. We could talk about this for hours. So I can't, like I'm yeah, when COVID is decided to go into space or something, I'd love to be on the ground organizing with folks, and helping like see a world hopefully in our lifetimes that sex work will be decriminalized, and we can start finding solutions to get people out of poverty.
Speaking of organizing, we're going to be doing some actions during the week of the Super Bowl, but one group that is going to be doing like a whole week worth of actions is Swap Behind Bars. I don't have all the details of their actions yet, so I'd recommend following them on like Twitter, Instagram, and No Olympics is also going to be plugging their information, but they're going to be doing some like webinars and you know, discussions kind of like this. But I think they're going to be doing several, but they're a great org. We've been talking to them, and yeah, I wanted to throw that in since you're bringing up organizing.
Yeah, we should talk about this like offline too. We should definitely talk more about this because we'd love to connect. And I think on just something I want to say too is like to also like with organizing, it's super important that we are organizing with folks that like have really strict principles, and who are not co-opting anybody's work in the movement. And I just want to say that. And yeah, thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you all for speaking. And we also wanted to see if Chela, I don't know if you would feel comfortable, but we wanted to also check in and see like maybe if you would want to speak about like the efforts as well that SWAP um, is doing right now as well, to see about like maybe plugging in the work that I know that y'all have been doing for a cool minute.
Oh yeah, of course. Right now we we just had a retreat this weekend. So some things that we've been doing is getting the word out, especially with a bill. I forgot the bill that's criminalizing folks with the intent to. It's about that criminalizes folks, targets folks for loitering with the intent to sell. It's going to be. We've been teaming up with a bunch of other groups in an effort to do that. There's also just getting the word out and like seeing what we can do in an effort to fight back. If y'all want to join our, if y'all want to have more of a conversation with us, you're more than welcome. We have our meetings the third Thursday of the month at 6 on Zoom. Yep, there you go.
So, Chela, were you saying you're involved in the anti-loitering bill organizing?
Some of us are, yes. I have been missing for the last few months due to some personal issues. But yeah, we've been doing a lot around that. Yeah.
Great. That would be really useful if you could talk about that bill. Yeah, organizing around it and what it is. That would be really helpful at our webinar, because we wanted that, to be part of it, because it's such a horrendous bill. I mean, such a horrendous law.
It is. So
yeah.
To be quite honest, like I said, I've been kind of out of it for the last few months. I was hoping that my friend who's been doing it, she's been on the ground doing it, going to the meetings, going to the councils, showing up in resistance to this. I was hoping that she would join us, but she did not. But if you want to get more information about this, I'll take take our information down, and then because I've been kind of just being real. Chela has been dealing with some emotions. Mother passed away. Have a good, any other questions?
Thank you, Chela. Thank you for sharing. And I think one of the things that we had been discussing as well was that there's a tactic that we've been using called Watch the Watchers, where we put the camera and from different angles and different spots where we document the various sections and the various partnerships and the various operations that law enforcement deploys and uses during such events. And we haven't done one in about a couple of years or so, about 3 or 4 years actually. There's actually videos that we have made. Watch the Watchers, they lie, and then Watch the Watchers, they still lie. Mostly for big events and all. So we've been thinking about maybe doing a training of that next week sometime, maybe on a Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock if folks are interested. And we're probably going to be, because this event is coming up and a lot of things are moving around town, So if there is interest to that, please email us, or if you want to just post your information in chat, if you're interested in having that training, we can organize that as well. So that is, yeah, that's they still lie. So yeah, I mean, I think that is also something that we can, because I think that helps in exposing a lot of the bullshit that we hear from law enforcement and places like the police commission. So I think it'll also then kind of, because on one of the videos, the first one with the Watch the Watchers, they lie, we actually on camera exposed an undercover as well and confronted him. And it was all documented. It was all on cameras too. So yeah, so if folks are interested, either they either post your information here or email us at, I think Matios posted our email address, stoplapdspying@gmail.com. And if it does happen, and if there's enough interest, would love to organize it and let folks know as to what's going on. So yeah. The second thing, what we are also asking is that whoever, that it doesn't have to be like an organized thing, like Watch the Watcher could also be done, that if Gigi and all, if you all are up out there at different spaces and, you know, just out on the street, checking things out. So if you see something like, you know, if you don't mind documenting some of that stuff as well, like if you see different equipment, you know, various other types of these vehicles that they use, various types of communication antennas and various types of cameras and different things. So if you all want to just document that, that would be super helpful. Because as Tiff was speaking about the police commission meeting, what is also happening is that just today they had another piece on their, where they're upgrading and upping their license plate readers as well. They're getting a new contract with Motorola. I mean, I think, and that falls into that history of a few years ago where Nui Martinez apparently had this brilliant idea of sending Dear John letters to people who are driving through a particular area and getting their information through license plate readers. So this is the kind of a political landscape. This is the kind of this really messed up, you know, just politics that we are in. That and it's basically just like everything else. You know, how people are being criminalized and put into databases as well. And lastly, you know, we would also be keeping an eye on things like the see something, say something, because this whole culture of deputization is rampant as well. Michael Moore, who's the chief of LAPD, recently announced putting out an appeal to Angelenos to report and to kind of just to call in any suspicious activity or suspicious person or anything like that. Obviously, the tough on crime rhetoric is in full swing. The election season is coming up. So everybody's trying to make hay and everybody's trying to criminalize people who are just trying to eke out a living as well. So that's the kind of space that we are in. So any other thoughts before we pass it back to Mariela and Chela from Rachel or Alex or Gigi?
Yeah, I actually have a thought. You know, what you're saying about federalizing the forces, you know, these big events and the license plate, where they use license plates, you know, in neighborhoods of prostitution, high prostitution. I mean, all of that stuff, it would be so great if somebody could speak about that at our webinar, as, you know, as part of the context that we're dealing with. You know, just everything the armaments and how, you know, all of that, how it's all increased, the militarization of the police, you know, that reveals itself at these events, not only, but, you know, is really visible at these events. I think, I don't know, what do you think, Alex? I think that would just be so useful. If possible, of course. I don't know.
We'll definitely try, and obviously our fearless leader Chela is going to be representing, so we will definitely you know, collectively share Chela bringing our message to the symposium.
Oh yeah, okay, that would work. Thanks.
Gigi, do you have anything else to add? Okay, so any of the actions, Gigi, that No Olympics is organizing, please do let us know, keep us posted as well, so we can
Definitely.
inform the broader membership of the coalition as well.
Yep, we're definitely planning something probably for the end of the week, around Friday of Super Bowl Sunday. So the Friday before, it's probably when we're going to do something. We're still firming it up though, so keep your eyes open, and we'll share that when we have the details.
Thank you. So passing it back to Nina and Mariela.
Thanks, Ahmed. Yeah, so just to recap as well. So the symposium, which the US Pros is putting together, that's on February 9th from 6 to 8 p.m. And then we, for the coalition, we are having the second Tuesday of the month, we have the fight against the war on youth. So next Tuesday, we're going to be focusing on the fight against the war on youth as well. We're going to be looking at the TVTP, which stands for the Targeting Violence and Terrorism Prevention, and looking at how like the police state is focusing, or LAPD is focusing on the grant specifically to target youth or to surveil youth through a 500 personnel that's non-LAPD, including teachers, counselors, and other folks that are typically working with youth. So that's going to be next, I believe that's the 8th at 6 to 8 p.m. and that's going to be through Zoom as well.
Thank you, Nee. And I just want to close in gratitude for everybody who was present today and shared from your heart, shared your stories. It was really powerful to be in everyone's presence and have this conversation. So I just want to thank you for that. And my heart and mind goes to what can we do? What can I do in action? So I'm looking forward to some of the actions that were lifted here. And as a cultural worker, I'm also really processing right now and thinking about the work that we have to do to continue to debunk the trafficking narrative and lift the veil on that guise that is being used. So yeah, I would love to build in future webinars, maybe around some more cultural work on what that could look like on the ground to fight the trafficking narrative too. That's where some of my ideas go to. And Kim is just putting an email there if anyone is interested in working on mapping and sex work. Feel free to email at kjam13@protonmail.com. We do want to do some more research mapping work and get a better sense of the histories of this line of work and this fight. So welcome, y'all. There's plenty to do and plenty of space to plug in. And the work is a little lighter in community with each other. So thank you all for lifting it together. It's an honor to meet you all and have this conversation tonight. Not sure if there's any other closing thoughts or comments before we say goodnight to each other.
Just to plug in, the Compton's Girls Club is hosting a tax 101 for young adults and youth. So if anyone is, needs that information for non-traditional incomes, make sure to check it out because taxes are confusing as hell.
Thank you. Any other community announcements or anything folks want to share before we log out?
Remember, SWAP's meeting is every third Thursday of the month, 6 to 8. If you want to get more information, please email me or hit us up and I'm down to send you the invite. And yeah, that's it.
Sweet. Thank you, Chela. And don't forget the symposium next Wednesday, and all the resources that were shared here tonight. Thank you so much. I hope everybody feels a little stronger in tonight's fight, and we can all do our part, and it'll make a difference for sure. So thank you. Have a good night, y'all. Good to see you. Hope to see you sometime soon. Peace to everybody.
Thank you, Mariela, for facilitating.
Thank you.
Likewise, Kim and
Thank
me.
you for having us.
Thank you, Mariela.
Thank you, Chela. See you. So, thank you, Alex, Rachel,
Thank
everybody.
you all.
Thanks, Nina.
Talk soon.
See you next time, y'all.